Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavine, it does. They need me.
Welcome, End of Dragons Daily 65. Today we'll be continuing more of the Mesmer discussion. There should be some Super Adventure Box stuff in the background, maybe some DRMs. Obviously those events are going on right now. To be honest, I would have expected to move on from the Mesmer stuff already, but the past 2 days we didn't have an End of Dragons Daily. Actually, for really good news, though it has caused a lot of things to be upended for me. The new PC has come, so I was told that it would actually be the end of April that stock for the GTX 3080 would be coming in, but it randomly, almost it feels like, showed up at my door the other day, and since then I've had a bit of a riot on my hands, really, moving furniture around, sorting everything out. I first essentially set it up, then realized it was a bit stupid to just replace the old PC immediately outright with the new one, because I have, as it seems, as the years have gone on, a ton of different bits of software and files and directory structures and things to copy over, and I'd be left without a paddle. So instead what I've done is set it up down here that I have both PCs running, and I really don't have much space. So while I can work away on this main one over the next couple of days, despite the crashes, I can slowly get the new one in order. And that, of course, means a lot of exciting things as well for later. It means I don't have to wait so long before we bring back some of those other series that have gone on hold. I have the logistics of figuring out how my weird Frankenstein modded setup of Final Fantasy XII can be ported to the new PC. But I'll be figuring that out, plotting out, you know, what I want to dedicate my time to and really get going. I honestly feel like 2020 has been on hold for me so far. I'm very glad that we've had this series at the very least, and now we can actually move on. You know, the crashes started hitting Final Fantasy XII back in November, and here we are already in April. So enough behind the scenes, let's jump into some more Mesmer comment. I've been pretty quick about grabbing these ones here today, so I am sorry to the countless really cool walls of text that I had thought 2 days ago that I really wanted to showcase, but now I can't find them because they're a bit buried. Nick Bowser said, I can't believe there was no comment on the shadow form joke in that comment yesterday. A shadow of its former self, that's hilarious. Well, I did see this, to be fair. I didn't know if it was actually a joke, though, and by the time I was done rambling about whatever else I was rambling about, I felt like it would labour the point a bit to go back. So, yeah, I guess we'll give the commenter from before the benefit of the doubt on that one. Leos OS says, I just realised that the Paragon Echo mechanic could be reworked for the Mesmer. Essentially cast a shout, and if a clone or phantasm is in earshot, it also casts the shout. This is a fun idea. So previously we'd mentioned the idea that maybe the clones or phantasms would have a pulsing effect rather than one action and then disappearing, be that, you know, executing a phantasm ability or a shatter. Maybe they instead pulse for a while before slowly dissipating, or they actually actively have to be dealt with in some way. This echo thing really is quite fun. So for people that didn't play Guild Wars 1, the Paragon was all about singing and chanting and lots of sound-based stuff. You know, people are looking at bards and they're looking at sirens and instrument players and all that kind of stuff with the Mesmer. And maybe it makes sense to tie that to Cantha, but obviously the Paragon from Guild Wars 1's Nightfall really still could exist in Guild Wars 2, I think. I think it could belong in a warrior at best. But one of the mechanics back then was a type of skill called an Echo, and what this was a really long-term, lingering passive benefit that couldn't be stripped. You know, if you gave someone an enchantment, there were a lot of skills that could break that enchantment and remove it. It's like an unrippable boon, and it's really long-term. Kind of a minor effect. Maybe it just gives a bit of health regen, a little bit of mood speed, a little bit of attack speed, something along those levels. But when a shout ended, it would refresh itself. So as long as the Paragon or an anthem or a chant, as long as the Paragon could keep using these sound-based effects, this echo would refresh and refresh and refresh and would stick about. And so that was how it worked in Guild Wars 1. It was very much something that existed on the user interface level. There weren't really big animations for it. Actually, I think I tell a lie. I don't think they all refreshed permanently. They just provided bonus effects whenever a shout ended. So maybe I use Go for the Eyes, which gives you a really high crit chance on your next attack. You do that attack, and now not only did you get the crit chance, but the shout has ended because you procced it. And now that's also procced the echo. And maybe the echo is inflict burning around yourself whenever a shout ends. So now you've crit and dealt burning in the area, right? Stuff like that. It was lots of fun from a buildcraft perspective, as so much Guild Wars 1 was. But now maybe, yeah, you are the Mesmer, you use some kind of sound-based effect, and it causes like this ripple to all of your other clones and things that are a bit more stationary, going back to that Scourgy idea. I can really see this working. That's a fun concept, and if they choose not to do Paragon on a warrior or somewhere else, maybe they can go for it here. We've seen how everything's kind of merged and repackaged in Guild Wars 2 as it is, like the ritualist-ish stuff over on the Renegade. And, you know, maybe they don't do Paragon for warrior because this whole spear thing, the above land underwater weapons, maybe it's just stupid to ArenaNet. Maybe they could have been doing it for years and they just never bothered before. And the reasons they never bothered before are the same, so there still won't be a Paragon, and they could do it here on the Mesmer. Or just some kind of ripple effect like that. You don't have to call it an echo after all. But echo and then tying it to the Echo Vowed Forest works well. Next we got AshtonC, who says, I've always liked the idea of a Mesmer mechanic that leans into a concept from Lissa's lore, duality. Have the Mesmer split from 1 into 2 controlled copies that move in mirror images to one another with every skill that is cast by both copies. Creating illusions and phantasms could build up a bar similar to a shroud that's consumed when activating duality, and the shatter skills can be switched out for skills focused around shattering self, pushing the effects from both of the copies and consuming the bar. Depending on the balance, have any skill used while duality is active reduce the bar, and have the two copies have reduced stats. Dual daggers or pistols could work thematically with this mechanic. Honestly, I'm not sure what you'd call the elite spec, the dualist. And also as an edit, damage to either split copy would deal damage to the character's overall health. So while duality is in use, the character could theoretically take double damage from certain attacks. Direct left and right movement strafe would be mirrored, but forward and back, and so on and so on. So this is really crazy. I kind of get what you're going for, though. I'm thinking years ago when I would play League, kind of like a Sharko style mechanic, where you've created a clone that truly is indistinguishable, or ideally is indistinguishable, and you kind of control it as you control yourself, and just to really psych people out. Now, I kind of like this idea. It's not really a minion idea, but it's another sort of thing. You know, in PvP, my favorite thing about Mirage is triggering illusory ambush, which ports you and all your clones to a random position and forces a D-target. So now the enemy player actually has to figure out which one you are. And you're hiding as a clone. If you're using that properly and you're not messing with WASD and stuff, you're hiding as a clone. But it can be easy to identify because of the health discrepancy between you and the other clones and seeing the condies ticking and stuff like that. So kind of a whole spec around that might be fun. That might also do interesting things to, say, Sword 3 or mirror images. You know, like Sword 3 swap could be kind of fun with it. So maybe this would have to have a lot of work, a lot of thought, and a lot of care, and a lot of planning. So I guess it depends on how ambitious you think End of Dragons can be. But it would be an interesting idea. The downside with stuff like this, as always, is, okay, well, how is that fun in PvE? I think it would feel like a minion spec in PvE. Is that a bad thing? Next, we've got NightSeraph, who says, thanks for taking the time to give such thoughtful commentary and insights on mine and everyone's ideas. Super cool concepts across the board. Everyone just has me so excited for whatever they dish out. Sounds like we got a Mesmer player here, guys. I hadn't really thought about the absence of the dagger until you mentioned it, because Mirage's axe fulfills a lot of that fantasy for me personally, but it would be very cool. A bit outside of the box, but I could even see him being used as a ranged weapon, somewhat akin to Yondu's weapon from Guardians of the Galaxy, zipping about and slicing up foes across the battlefield. The more I think about it, I'd love to see a ranged weapon as the signature for the new Mesmer spec in general, since we had 2 melee options in a row with shield and axe. So I think you're onto something here. I already mentioned in the previous part that one thing I'm really looking forward to is a dagger. That's my main idea on what I want for Mesmer. And where are we going? To a continent that is kind of East Asian inspired. And I know we haven't really explicitly said it, and it would feel a bit odd in Guild Wars, but people are looking for that kind of ninja-y feel, right? They're thinking about throwing stars and shuriken. I like the idea of a Mesmer that uses daggers as throwing knives. Like, we don't really have that well in the game. There is the Ranger that does it. Dagger offhand on Ranger is kind of a throwing knife thing, but I think they could go a lot further. So a main hand dagger for Mesmer. They don't have to dual wield daggers. They don't have to have it off. I would say main hand. This could be fun. And, you know, it's always fun thinking about main hands for Mesmers, for what it's worth, because you get to see how the clones interact with that too, right? I think you'd want them to be really fast-moving projectiles so that it doesn't feel like Scepter and it doesn't feel like Staff, which, yes, may operate at different ranges, but they're kind of these very slow bouncing orbs, right, in the case of Staff, for example. I'd like to see these daggers moving quick. They could bounce again, but moving quick. And you've got a pretty good main hand there that could fit into any number of these other concepts, really. Rognick has a little point to make here, just rounding out with some of the Mesmer stuff, saying, I just searched on the Guild Wars 2 wiki, and the only mention of Migraine on there is a Heart of Thorns achievement, so there is still room for a Migraine skill. Well, so yeah, maybe they could do this as well. People that don't know, again, this was kind of a big, iconic Guild Wars 1 hex that the Mesmer could use. It degenerated the hell out of the opponent, but it also increased their cast time. And Guild Wars 1 was a lot more oriented, particularly as a Mesmer, around the idea of interrupting your target. And so Mesmer was a great elite skill that would allow you to really pressure some backline caster by, you know, putting a threat on their life because their health is going down so much, but also as they tried to cast spells maybe to keep themselves alive, like let's say you're targeting a monk and he's trying to cure the hex now, that's taking longer and you can interrupt it and you can bait stuff out. There was another skill like Migraine called Frustration. There was a lot of really fun stuff about Guild Wars 1 Mesmer that just built around denial, really, that doesn't really exist in Guild Wars 2, and so maybe they could do this. I want to make one final point as well. Nobody said this, but again, it's a Guild Wars 1 mechanic from the Mesmer that maybe they could still be going with, and that's the idea of skill thievery. So in the original, you could steal your opponent's elite skill and use it back against them. You could interrupt an ability and use it back against them. You could cure yourself of a hex and then cast that hex back at a new target. Or you could rip an enchantment and then use that enchantment for yourself. And because you were a Mesmer, you would combo that with fast casting. There's a lot of stuff around that. And these playstyles were not necessarily that great or effective. Not until much later where there were ways to boost your attributes and stuff. But it is an identity of Mesmer that I think is very fun, especially when it comes to PvE applications. If you get kind of like a blue mage sense in there, you know, I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV recently, thinking about how the blue mage works in that game, and blue mage in the rest of that franchise, frankly. And the idea of actually being able to take my enemy's skills is cool. There were even bugs in Guild Wars 1 that allowed you to do that. Like you could, for a one patch, I remember you could interrupt a crate as it used Metamorphosis. Crate in the original game would transform. And then you could cast Metamorphosis yourself and become a various types of crate and change your skill bar. It was fantastic. So, you know, if the devs are making a new Canthan expansion, and this is the big idea about this Mesmer spec, they can build a lot of that content into the new environment too, can't they? In theory, that's something I'd love to see too. So let's round out the video here. This isn't about the Mesmer, but from Pilvi Karlaya, who says, finally I'm caught up, long-time viewer, fan of the content, but I started watching a week after you started the series, and I just don't watch as much YouTube as I used to. I was wondering how many of your viewers nowadays do you think don't actively play the game? I remember you mentioning a long time ago, there were a fair number of viewers just keeping tabs on things with Guild Wars 2 in general, planning or hoping to come back someday. I haven't really played since they stopped doing voice acting because of the virus. I think, by the way, that exact moment burned a lot of people in the Icebrood saga. There was a lot working against the saga, and coronavirus did do something there. I know even for me that affected me in a big way. I know they've since resumed the VA and added it to older patches, but I'm too deeply invested in other games now and plan to come back closer to End of Dragon's launch to catch up on story and go through the expansion pack fresh. So yeah, I thought this was an interesting question. I don't really know what the proportions are, but almost every single video I've been making for years now, I always try to keep friendly to people who are just keeping tabs on the game. My impression about Guild Wars is that it's kind of carved itself out as an MMO. People should just play in small amounts, and I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that was smart for the devs to ever pursue, or a reputation they ever should have encouraged. I really don't, but they did, and I think we're in this place now where a lot of people do treat this game this way. So I try not to make any assumptions, really. I will say of my overall sub base, you know, it's only the thin end of the wedge that are still watching. There's a ton of totally inactive people, but of the people actually still watching the videos, yeah, I think there's probably a decent proportion that aren't playing right now. but like to keep tabs. And, you know, especially when I do like a patch video or if a trailer comes out and stuff, you know, I'm really angling at people like that. So there you have it, guys. Thanks very much for watching End of Dragons Daily. Again, I'll be faffing with the PC a lot over the next couple of days. It's been so bumpy the past, like, what, 2 weeks? You know, we've had all these gaps in the schedule. But, well, hopefully that will be a thing of the past. No more random crashes as I work. I can do the NVIDIA 3D Vision video for you guys. I even just want to do a video talking in general about game settings and stuff. So there's a lot of cool projects. It's just a matter of getting this thing up and running and signing into a billion different services and getting all my passwords across and my databases and stuff. It's going to be annoying. Anyway, thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy. Please, so in the next part, I really don't have any ideas for a specific topic. So just give me random comments and ideas about regular Guild Wars 2 or End of Dragons. You know, I'm grasping at straws. Please, if you've got any thoughts, drop them down below. And I'll get as many interesting questions and comments as I can for the next part. So I'll see you guys there. Thanks very much. Catch you next time.